let's dive into some of the shenanigans that happened behind him. Because since then, on Wednesday, or was it Tuesday? Tuesday, that's right, it was on election night. NASCAR released the penalties, which talk about, garbage hour or whatever. There's a thing in politics of like releasing stuff you don't want anyone to find or see on Friday evenings. And this felt like that. Basically, NASCAR, after investigating what happened between the 24 William Byron, who was falling back, then eventually fell into the clutches of Austin Dillon and Ross Chastain, who rode side by side and didn't pass him, with their teams telling them that he was only 1 point to the good, and so basically not to pass him for their Team Chevy brethren, which involved all the key partner teams from Chevy, which is a big part of this. Remember, there's key partner teams, of which there's 3 for Chevy, which is Hendrick Motorsports, Richard Childress Racing, and Trackhouse. Mm-hmm. They obviously wanted a Chevy in the Championship 4, and this was the way to do it, and obviously it had been discussed. NASCAR did not like those discussions on the radio, of course, because it does feel a little bit like collusion, and there's so many ways to go down this path of what is right and what's not. What's that?
It was collusion.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was collusion. So they penalized the 1 team, the 3 team, and the 23 because on the flip side of this was Christopher Bell trying to get one more position late in the race. He was a lap down after having spun out and unable to recover from that. And the car ahead of him 1 lap down was Bubba Wallace, who's a Toyota teammate. Bubba went very slow the last couple of laps, particularly or potentially saying he had a tire going down or an issue within the car. And then Christopher Bell flung it off into turn 3, trying to get around the 23, missed the corner, gets in the marbles, of which there was tons because the super soft tire that Goodyear brought put down a ton of marbles and rubber above the racing surface. He hits the wall, he gets back in the throttle, rides the wall, and NASCAR deemed that to be a safety violation since the Hail Melon of 2022 with Ross Chastain is no longer allowed. That gets William Byron in. All those teams that were involved in that were penalized. Basically, their crew chiefs and spotters of each car were basically suspended for this coming weekend, which includes my spotter, Brandon McReynolds. So we've had to make a change there. And team executives were penalized as well. Do you have thoughts on this now that we're on Thursday, that we've seen it?
It was everything that I witnessed in the last 20 laps of that race, other than Ryan Blaney, was a disgrace.
Yeah. I didn't like it.
And I don't know. It's a product of the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a product of the incentive structure. It's almost like you have 2 completely opposite things happening here 2 weeks in a row. Homestead, we had the greatest example of why the playoff system is amazing and anything could happen. And just because you put together 30 great weeks but didn't show up on the right time or the right moment doesn't mean you deserve a championship, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's the new NASCAR. And I loved it. It was fun. I was thrilled. One of the best races I've ever seen. And then literally the same scenario repeating itself in Martinsville, but at a totally different outcome. Now, the Blaney part of it, we're overshadowing his drive, right? And so that deserves attention, and that on its own we would probably be having this conversation. But instead, it's like the other thing that can happen in this high-pressure, win and you're in moment, moments matter, Game 7 moments, all this stuff, is the race manipulation that happened on Sunday.
Yep.
I am not going to be denied what my eyes saw and what I know. So these drivers, Austin Dillon, Ross Chastain, these drivers, you have no idea how good these freaking drivers are. How much they train, how well they can drive their cars and make passes when they have a faster car. You have no idea what these guys are capable of. To watch them ride side by side behind a car that they're 4/10 faster than for 15 laps was a disgrace.
Yep.
This is not racing. And I don't blame them personally. Like, I know those guys personally. I don't blame them personally. I know the position there. I understand the position they were in. I've been in similar positions myself. That's why I feel like I can feel so strong about this. And it's just like, it's just sad. I don't, they're the strings are being pulled by not even their teams. It's the manufacturer is pulling the strings there. And I don't know what the solution is, or getting rid of the playoffs is not the solution, because you still, it's like you end up with a tight points battle and you're going to end up with the same thing. So, but I mean, Chevy didn't build a $300 million facility in Concord, North Carolina to go let these teams knock each other out of the playoffs and not have anybody in the Final Four.
Yep.
Like they didn't organize all of their engineering under one roof, right? And maybe I'm not even calling Chevy out. It's like Toyota, Chevy, Ford. They didn't organize systematically over the last 5-6 years, organize all of their engineering under one roof. They didn't lobby NASCAR to allow them to centralize all of the wind tunnel data and centralize all of the tire data and basically all the data there is on these cars and simulation tools. They didn't do that over the last 5 or 6 years so that they could let the teams race independently of each other. The manufacturer's mission is to have all 4 cars of their own in the Final Four.
Right. And this has been a topic we've discussed on here many times, in that the manufacturers have continued to gain power over the racing series that started years ago with these tech centers, the centralization, as you put it, data and information, the wind tunnel, and now with the next-gen car, they really control almost everything. And therefore, these teams are at their behest. Like, they are the largest contributor at times to some of these teams, financially, long-term, data-wise, information, all those things. So they're really in a box with that. I think NASCAR did mention, and Alton Sawyer said there was no penalties for the manufacturers because there's no provision in the rule book, but they'll look at that afterwards. I know Denny Hamlin mentioned maybe you dock the manufacturer points because that manufacturer championship is something they all pay attention to. It's a slippery slope. They're the largest contributors financially to NASCAR outside the media rights holders. So how much can you hurt them? I think it is not in their best interest to have fans see this go down and have the same reaction that you and I had, which is disgust, right? I sat there on pit road. I'm watching all this go down. I'm a part of the broadcast. And I just sat there and I realized with 25 to go, there was 2 Chevys catching William Byron. I was like, well, they're not going to pass him. And then I saw that Bubba was ahead of Christopher Bell, and I said, oh, just watch. If that 23 slows down, and sure enough, he did. And you're just sitting there going, oh, my God. Like, really? Really? Mm-hmm. And
yep.
It just...
But it's a tough dynamic.
It is.
It is a tough dynamic for NASCAR to handle because the manufacturers they are not competitors in this sport in the same way that the teams are. They're like financiers of the sport. They're guests in the sport, right? They're paying guests of the sport. And so they're sort of, and I want to say this because I think I agree with it. They need to be treated as such, right? They're sponsors. Maybe that's a better way to say this. They're sponsors of the sport. They're not exactly competitors of the sport, right? If they're here for one reason and one reason only, and that is to sell more cars to retail customers, right?
Yep.
Production vehicles. That's the only reason those manufacturers are here. If we, in these scenarios, treated them as equals as the race teams, right? With penalties and announcements and financial penalties and infractions and all that stuff, then at some point we would either fix the problem or the executive level of these manufacturers would be like, hey, why are we spending $200 million a year on this sport that is abusing us? Abusing our brand.
Yeah,
right? No,
I know.
That's a poor choice of words because I'm not trying to say that NASCAR is abusing them, but like that, at some level, the executive of General Motors would look at NASCAR and be like, okay, 3 times a year I have to get a report on the damage to my brand because of something that happened in NASCAR. Right? They will, as a result, cut back on their spend, their marketing investment. They're not, because it is a marketing tool. That's it. They're not.
Yep.
There's nothing else. There's no other reason that they're in NASCAR.
Yep.
So, but they're not the same as the teams. They can't be held accountable in the same way as the teams because they're a sponsor. It's just a different dynamic, right, wrong, or indifferent. And if you disagree with me, share it and tell me and let me know your perspective. If you're a NASCAR executive listening to this, a OEM executive listening to this, or a team executive, share it. Let me know what you think, because like I'm basing this off of my experience and my beliefs, and that's one of the tough balances here. And that also leads down so many other paths as to why, where NASCAR has to make decisions with rules and everything to try to get other manufacturers into the sport, but they also have to appease the ones that they have. I mean, if you're NASCAR, it is a difficult situation. But, NASCAR did, I think, what they needed to do with these penalties. They couldn't penalize William Byron, unfortunately. There's just not enough, I don't know, there's probably just not enough of evidence in this moment that Jeff Gordon himself was involved in, the making sure that the 3-car, whatever deal that was made, it was done beyond a firewall of cybersecurity that NASCAR has access to at the moment, right?
Yep.
But there was collusion there. That was a coordinated effort, whether it happened in the moment or it was planned the day before. There was clearly a coordinated effort to make sure that the 24 got what it needed to stay in the playoffs.
And how do you think about this? Well, think about this. How do you write that rule to stop this sort of stuff? Think about how complex this is. How do you write a rule? Well,
I don't think it's a rule. I think it's I don't think it's a rule. I think it's an incentive structure.
Well, because think about super speedways.
We've proven in so many things in life and government and racing, like you can't just legislate your way out of every mess.
Amen to that. Amen.
Right? You can't regulate your way out of every mess. Right? That's what creates track limits. That's what's all roads lead to track limits. Seriously,
I'm serious. No, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying.
So if you don't share my ideology, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I don't like. There's no rule that fixes this. It's just it's an incentive structure. It's something in the structure of the sport that allows these teams to end up working too closely together, and then you pair that with a playoff system, and win and you're in, and I don't know, and all of these things lead, to the teams are colluding and GM is in charge.
And it happens in almost every cutoff race in some capacity, whether it's a teammate choosing a different restart line to let the other teammate have a better restart, so on and so forth. This happens all the time, but this was the most stark example that we've seen in a while.
What's funny about that is, and this is how hard it is this is how hard of a position the whole sport is in to fix something like this, is like what you just said is borderline appropriate, in my opinion. That's charming. That's racing. That's strategy. Right? Choosing lines and this and that and helping here and helping there. But, running a roadblock in the last 15 laps to help a boat anchor make it into the playoffs is not, right? How do you even fix that? I don't know.
But it's a very complex thing that we're not going to solve here on Money Lap right this second.
But I hope that we've opened your mind to, and by you I mean everybody listening. I hope that we've opened
our one listener.
Yeah, our listener's mind to what this problem really looks like, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, listener, let us know. Comment below. We appreciate it. If you're getting your feedback, we'll dive. I mean, I think it's an all-season discussion we can also have that's longer form.